Good evening, Awoken, and welcome back for another Awoken Wednesday episode of Awoken with Aulden. As always, I'm your host, Aulden S. Nance, and we have a critically important, time-relevant topic for you this evening. Going to be doing a comprehensive deep dive of the history of Persia, now referred to as the Islamic Republic. We're also going to be doing some analysis of the events that have been occurring within the last couple of hours since this morning we joined the, if you were here for some of the previous live streams, we did on Saturday, we did breaking news coverage of critically important, timely events regarding the attack against Iran by a joint attack from the United States and Israel, resulting in a decapitation strike of critical political personnel, and more or less the top target being Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, met his demise at his compound in Tehran, along with several other critical and important personnel within the regime, Revolutionary Guard, people of that nature. Kicking off essentially a who knows how long campaign. Once again, it is 2026, and the United States finds itself in another, let's be honest, this is a regime change war in the Middle East. The president was quite explicit about it in his address to the nation Friday night / Saturday morning, urging the Iranian people to overthrow their government and take control of key power centers and other important infrastructure, government infrastructure within Iran's borders. So we're going to be talking about all that tonight. And here, let's get the comment section going. Okay, at Jenny Harrell says, good evening. Good evening, Jenny. Thank you for being on the stream on this Awoken Wednesday. Happy Awoken Wednesday, everybody. Glad that you are back once again on this Wednesday evening. Okay, so let's go through some of the stuff in the last couple of hours we've seen. We've seen that at least reporting signals to us that there is maybe not an insurgency, but some kind of maybe invasion, I should say rather, from Kurds into Iran as we speak, hoping to be that ground force. As I've said multiple times on previous streams, whether it was 2 weeks ago when we really got into the thick of things when it came to this conflict, on Saturday, I believe I mentioned it, that even with the Supreme Leader gone, other top personnel, it's still a nation of 92 million people. You're not going to be able to bomb the regime out of power, because I'll get into this in a little bit, but this regime actually believes in something, if that makes any sense. Just kind of play with that in your head for a few minutes. They actually have maybe some core identity / beliefs that a lot of other maybe regimes or governments or even groups of people, for that matter, lack across planet Earth. So, as I said, a ground force is going to be needed, because even, let's say if the missile defense program is totally finished, if the Navy, if the Air Force, if any remnant of the nuclear program is all gone, there's still a 1,000,000-man plus army that remains. Around 500,000 standard Iranian military and a little over 500,000 Revolutionary Guard force. You're not going to be able to get them all. And something that is causing a split among, let's just say for the sake of argument, 90 million people are at play. Let's say 40% of the people are okay with the current regime. They buy it. They don't want regime change within the population. Now you're already down to 60% already. That 60% is not unified in any way, shape, or form other than tossing the regime. Maybe they want Reza Pahlavi, the Shah's exiled son, to regain the title of monarch, of the king of Iran. Maybe there's a subsect of that 60% that would prefer a liberal democracy or having elections. So, and something that the only thing that 60% may have in common is that they're not armed. The Revolutionary Guard would still remain the only population within the country that has capabilities to inflict severe violence or retain some authority within the country. And so you're going to need some ground force to eliminate or force submission of Revolutionary Guard, Iranian military forces, etc. So that's what the Kurds may be trying to do here. Okay, so before we really hop into the thick of things, I would love to remind you, if you're on the stream for the first time, if you're here second, third time, please leave the video a like. Deeply appreciate that. Please share the show with your friends, your coworkers, your mother, father, spouse, children. Please subscribe to the channel. That's the number one best way you can support me at this current moment in time as we are building the Awoken brick by brick and day by day. As well, you can find the show on Rumble, Spotify, X, Instagram, Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. I believe that's all 7 of the platforms. I just noticed my there we go. Okay, now we're back. The bubble had changed somehow. It wasn't purple anymore. Okay, we are back to full strength in that regard. However, I really before we dive into, I just want to say a few things. Before I even thought of starting the show or started the show, last summer after the attacks against the nuclear facilities in Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan, the 3 major plants or infrastructure that were targeted in the 12-day war, it really got me thinking for the first time that we had a president that promised America first, that promised no more intervention in the Middle East, and it just really got me thinking for the first time that, something's not right here. Something really doesn't make sense. Why is this happening? I'm kind of puzzled, at least. Just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I was like, okay, well, the best way to really... because we know the president, back in 2016, destroyed Jeb Bush for his brother's actions in Iraq. Called the Iraq War stupid and a miscalculation and a lie. Called out the lie that there were no weapons of mass destruction within Iraq. Said it was a stupid war, whatever. And now here we are 10 years later in another stupid war, regime change war in the Middle East. Once again, taking on a much tougher opponent. And I'll explain why they're a much tougher opponent here in a few moments once we start the presentation. But it really got me thinking that just didn't make it lacked sense, right? It was a total betrayal of the America First agenda of no more conflict in the Middle East. And I was like, okay, let's, and the only way I thought I could maybe try and get to the bottom of it was to learn about the history of the country. And my findings were quite large, maybe awoken me to the reality of what's happening within our country, and it helped answer why a little bit that we actually attacked them last June. So we are going to, please feel free. I'll leave the comment section open if you have any questions. Would love to hear from you. Any comments? Would love to let me know what you think of the slide deck, of the analysis, and we're going to hop right into things. All right, let's, Beth says hello. Hello, Beth. Thank you for joining the stream this evening. Here, I need to get for some reason it deleted it deleted the purple background as well. Okay, perfect. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. Hello, Beth. Thank you for joining the stream. Howdy, Beth. Glad that you are with us to learn about the history of Iran. Made this last summer, really just for fun, honestly, before I even started the channel. It was really a personal kind of side quest, I should say, more or less, and it changed my life. Lucy says, good evening. Good evening, Lucy. Glad to have all of you on the stream this evening. Very thrilled that you are here, ready to learn about Iran in at least my original research. Alrighty, so a deeper look into Iran, beyond the headlines, how Iran really works, in an educational, important, and worthy presentation by Aulden S. Nance. Before we get into anything else, just a reminder for everybody, here's Iran on the map. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor. However, it's slightly located to the northeast of the Strait of Hormuz, the Persian Gulf, right? It borders 7 countries. It is considered, as of this moment, I'd say arguably tied for the greatest power in the Middle East. Another significant geographical location is you have the Strait of Hormuz, which is 20% of the global oil supply runs through this little strait. So they can close that down at any moment to cause global panic within the global markets. They also have, if you kind of look at the map, I'm not sure if you can see the cursor, but they have proxies throughout the region in the Middle East that assist the regime and the Shiite Muslim ideals to advance and spread influence throughout the region. Okay, so that's just so you know where it is, because I know a lot of people may not know where Iran is on a map. So now you know, if you didn't know before. Little snapshot of Iran, right? It's, as we know from the Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz interview, there's a little more than 92 million people that live in the Islamic Republic. That's a lot of people. Tehran, the largest city in the country, has about 1.5 million more people than that reside in New York City. So when you're seeing these massive bombing campaigns within Tehran, just imagine how many people live there. Even though we know several have been advised to evacuate, still a lot of people that live in their capital city, a lot more than that live in our largest city, not our capital city, rather. However, they speak Farsi, that's their official language, and they're Shiite Muslims. So most Muslims on planet Earth are Sunni Muslims. Saudi Arabia is the headquarters for that sect of Islam. That's where the Mecca, they walk, if all Muslims that are physically and financially able to visit Mecca and walk around that black cube 6 times, I believe it is, are able and supposed to do that. Including Shiite Muslims as well. But Saudi Arabia, they have that within their country's borders, right? However, Shiite Muslims, they're only about 10 to 15% of Muslims worldwide. So they've always been a minority within their own religion. So just kind of plant that seed in your head as we continue further tonight. There are also some Sunni Muslims, Christians, Jews, and other more minority religions that do reside in the country. We see this through Ali Khamenei's Twitter account. He would, on at least a very well Iranian state propaganda media, the supreme leader would always visit Christians on Christmas and meet with them, because in Islam, Jesus is a prophet. In the Quran, I believe he's mentioned several more times than Muhammad is as well. So that's also just something to kind of think of, is that Jesus, he's not the Messiah, he's not the main dog in Islam. However, he is an important figure still within the religion. They see him as a prophet. There's Persian is the majority. There is a major Persian versus Arab divide. If you watch some of my man on the street interviews at the anti-Iranian regime protest on Saturday, there was a woman that said the regime is occupied by Arabs and not Persians. Just right, that alone told me that it's she already has that blood. Her blood's boiling over this divide already. Another reason to be against the regime and her views. Let's look into some geographical advantages and resources that the country possesses. As I've already mentioned, the Strait of Hormuz, 20% of the global oil supply, which is that's a major card to play. When you think of geopolitics, it helps me to think of it as, if you're comparing 3 to 5 countries or whatever, imagine them at a blackjack table at a casino or a poker table. You're playing poker with your buddies, and it's really, each country has a set of cards that are unique to their country alone for the most part. Some are always similar, right? Like maybe it's a European country, like Belarus, Western Europe. They have the same NATO card as Germany does, or the United States does. Even though it's kind of different in a different weight and value. But each country has a different set of cards. And some countries get a royal flush, some countries get a crummy hand. That's just the reality of life, honestly. That's why I reject a nationalism for all nations kind of mindset. Is that there is a human lottery, there is a truth about human life that is everyone might be able to have the same opportunity, but not everyone is guaranteed to the same finish line, right? However, some of the cards that Iran possesses are pretty powerful. Strait of Hormuz, the Alborz and Zagros Mountains in the northeast and western side of the country prevents a ground invasion from the Persian Gulf, essentially. So you have to go over all of that mountainous terrain, and the only way you get there is you'd have to drop people in, kind of like if you were a small child growing up on 4th of July, you'd light the firework and a little army parachute guy would be he'd pop out of the little firework mechanism. So that's, at least if you're invading from the west, the mountains protect them in that regard. It's also used for their more complex and protected nuclear facilities and programs. That's where a lot of them are. They're buried deep underground. We saw this in the 12-Day War, that it took the bunker buster bombs to inflict damage on those key facilities. And as well, we didn't see it this time, but in other cases, I'm sure maybe that's where Perzeshkian, the president of Iran, maybe went during the start of this conflict, or maybe some other senior government personnel or other ayatollahs, even for that matter, went to these mountains to take cover, to hide. But not Khamenei this time. He was at his compound, and as we know, it was leveled. He was inside of the compound at the time, and he died as a result of that bombing campaign. So these mountains provide shelter in case of emergencies for some government officials, other important people. The Gulf of Oman and Persian Gulf also as well. You have those waterways that they have senior, not maybe control, but some major influence in those waterways for trade, oil reserves, oil entering and exiting the country. Particularly, as we know, it's a huge it's a petrostate, with the snapback sanctions against them from Europe in September of 2025. Oil has been the name of the game for the regime's economic survival. Particularly, about 40% of China's oil comes from Iran. So China has one of their cards on the poker table is at severe risk right now. Right, so that's just kind of before we get into the major history, that's laying the game out. Those are some of the major cards that the country possesses. Let's go all the way back. Here we go. We're going to slingshot all the way back into very early recorded human history. We have a fella, Cyrus the Great. If you were also watching, if you've been paying attention to the anti-Iran regime protests I've been attending, there have been flags of Cyrus the Great by protesters. One of the women I was interviewing Saturday mentioned that Persians are children from Cyrus the Great. Founded the major empire in 550 BCE. The Cyrus Cylinder, the first charter of human rights, led to racial equality as well as religious freedom. So that is still practiced today among most civilizations, I should say. Has a major cultural legacy. However, his empire was conquered by the next figure we're going to be discussing here, Alexander the Great. So Darius III eventually fell to Alexander the Great. Just some notable battles for you about within Persia. At the time, it's Persia, right? It wasn't changed until the mid-1920s after Reza Shah took power, overthrowing the Qajar dynasty within Iran. However, we'll get to that here in several slides from now. Conquered the empire. Uh, the siege of Tyre, I should say, rather. Excuse me. So there was this moat around this island. It was a half mile off the coast, I believe, in what is now present day Lebanon. And for 6 to 7, a little around 6 to 7 months, Alexander the Great had this campaign to essentially mole. He built a mole, had his army enter through that mole, and they conquered the city. I believe they killed about half of the people there, and either the women, children, half of them were sent into slavery or they were killed. A pretty major campaign back in the day for Alexander the Great, and some other significant decisive battles. So actually, I believe one of these. So Darius the Third. Imagine. So every family has family struggles, right? All people, all civilizations have struggles. This Darius the Third fella. In the Battle of Issus, he defeated Darius III for the first time. I believe there was a second battle in the 331 BCE that led to the demise of Darius III. However, the first battle between the two men, Darius III fled and left his wife, his mother, and his children behind. Just kind of said, "Screw you guys! I'm running away." But Alexander the Great was a kind fella. He did not inflict pain. I believe he kept them all alive, treated them well, and they were semi-incorporated into daily life for Alexander the Great. At least did not result in a slaughter of those individuals. So, life. Yeah, sometimes family life stinks. However, you probably haven't been outright abandoned by your son in that regard. Okay, so let's go to the next guy. Let's continue on Greek influence in Iran, then Persia. Multiple errors. Alexander the Great, his influence continued to and be supreme, I should say, within the country, whether it was metal currencies such as coins or other gods, right? Architecture within buildings and the arts, the theater, culture, plays, other community events, right? Greek influence remained there for a significant time due to the influence of Alexander the Great. Okay, so that's just a little tidbit about that. So here's probably one of the more. Now we're going to head into those first couple of slides were build-up slides. Now we're going to head into the Shia versus Sunni rival conflict. Again, you have to know the history to understand why as I mentioned several minutes ago now, you have the Sunni Muslims in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the HQ for the Sunni Muslims. And the Shiite Muslims are in Persia / the Islamic Republic. This goes all the way back in their religion to Muhammad, their main prophet, their Messiah, their central figure they look up to. Is the Sunni Muslims believe that Muhammad's companion Abu should lead the religion, should lead the people that follow the religion. But the Shiites believe that Muhammad, the bloodline and the succession line should stay within the family, and supported Ali, the cousin and son-in-law to Muhammad. Several years later, Ali was assassinated. And as of now, today, Sunni Muslims make up around 85 to 90% of the world's population. As I've said, Saudi Arabia is the Sunni powerhouse of the country, and Shiite Muslims are 10 to 15% of worldwide Muslims. And Iran is the Shiite powerhouse. So already, just a couple things for you to think about is that I've identified already that there's a belief system for these people. We're 8 slides in, really 7 slides in. One slide was the title slide. So within 7 slides, you've already realized this country has some kind of cultural identity. Again, another big-time rivalry. Arabs versus Persians. The lady in that Man on the Street interview said the current regime is occupied by Arabs. She has no idea what the hell is this current government in Iran. Does not want anything to do with it. Let's go back to the Islamic conquest of Persia. The Persians saw Arabs as conquerors, right? The Persians kind of wanted to defend, right? And Iran eventually became the Shiite Muslim powerhouse, unlike most Arab Sunni states. And if you've listened to some of the episodes that I have done on Hezbollah and the Houthis and other groups, other proxy groups, is that the Shiite populations had to battle through a lot, in all honesty, to get to where they are today. Persians speak Farsi as well, not Arabic. And Iran is Persia, Saudi Arabia Arab, as the regional power rivals compete over Shiite versus Sunni rivalry. The politics, so you have the axis of resistance, which is the Popular Mobilization Force in Iraq, Shiite militias in Syria, the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Iran and the Revolutionary Guard within Iran as well. So, and as we saw, the Sunnis are much more aligned with the West, because if we're talking about human rights, remember, I think it was 2018, Jamal Khashoggi, that Washington Post journalist, was chopped up into a gazillion pieces, and the United States looked the other way. They did not really. There was no severe consequences on the Saudis, really, right? The Saudis, they were kind of caught red-handed, so they had to send in. I can't remember the fellow's name. He got his college education at North Texas University. He's Western educated. Here, I'm gonna try pull him up real quickly on the monitor here. However, they send this particular individual out from the kingdom. He was also, when King Abdullah was king of Saudi Arabia, he was the point guy to talk to Western media. Sorry, 1 second. All right, his name is Here, I'll kind of find it here in the next few Saudi Arabia. we'll find that in a moment. Um, yeah, that's not super important right now. Okay, I'll just kind of continue. But however, the main point is that the Saudis have somebody to run point for them on the media, and as well that if you that the Saudis were able to commit such an act like that, and nothing really happened, right? So just kind of keep that in mind for as we discuss further build up. Okay, so around 700 CE, you have this Islamic conquest that occurs throughout the region. Arab Muslim armies conquer the Caesarian Empire. There's this the Twelver Shiism state religion. The Twelver Shiite Islam is one of the more important things that you should remember for what's currently happening right now. Is that it's a huge modern Islamic identity for the country. We're almost to 1900, right? So the Qajar dynasty, some modernization attempts. However, the rule was marked by foreign meddling. Russia, Britain really kind of pulled the strings. There was some maybe more Western ideals presented by the Constitutional Revolution, established parliament and limits. It kind of crippled the monarchy a little bit, but there were some seeds of nationalism and anti-colonial sentiment. So not a huge deal here. Okay, so now, I know this is a little tough to see. I just want to remind everybody, I didn't make any edits to this original PowerPoint. So I'll read the bullets in full for this slide. So you have the Anglo-Russian Convention. If you can kind of see on the slide, on the image in the background, is you have the southern portion of the country, the British had control over, and the northern part was the Russian sphere. The center part was the center sector, I should say, rather, had some influence among both regions. However, neither country claimed outright control. However, the major takeaway is that Iran felt like their sovereignty was violated by this, a major no-no, and it fueled nationalism again. So now I've talked about a couple of times, nationalism, it's a common belief among the population. It's something to believe in. Allowed British influence over control in the Persian Gulf. Now here's where we're discussing this is the regime right before the current regime, essentially. The last monarchy. The last Shahs of Persia, Reza Pahlavi, and the Pahlavi era from 1925 and 1979. Reza Shah focused on centralization, had actually instead, so in the current regime is that women, it's forced hijab laws. In the past, in the prior monarchy, is that it was forced Western dress code, essentially. And we'll discuss that here in a few minutes. However, Mohammad Reza Shah, the White Revolution, some land reforms, women's suffrage, rapid modernization. In the 1950s, we saw this with the Shah out of power. Operation Ajax, and there's a whole slide on that as well. So this era led to why this current regime is in power. If there's any takeaway from the entire night, these next couple of slides are what you need to understand the most. I'd argue, honestly. There was rising clerical and populist opposition that set the stage for the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Reza Shah. Okay. His big things were infrastructure, where I'm the Shah now. He was a former military guy, overthrew the Qajar dynasty, forced the Western dress code, banned the hijabs, and now for the first time since ever, it's instead of Persia, it's Iran. It's now not Islamic Republic then. However, it's still Iran. And he was an autocrat, an authoritarian, used his military background to rule aggressively through the Persian Cossack brigade. Excuse me. Had secret police such as the Savik. We'll talk about those guys here in a little bit too. And any press that was against him was silenced or killed off. So that's just a little something to know about Reza Shah. Now, so when I made this, Ali Khamenei was still alive. He was still the incumbent supreme leader. So I really want to maybe, so you guys can understand a little bit more about why he was the supreme leader, began his tenure in 1989, and held that position until just a couple of days ago. So I want you guys to understand the historical significance behind this one human being within a country's history and population, as well as influence. Born in 1939, son of a cleric, educated in traditional seminaries, and he studied, and his personal mentor, he studied under Ruhollah Khomeini, who was the first supreme leader of Iran, the first Ayatollah, the only other supreme leader other than Khamenei ever in the country's history. And to overthrow the Savik and the Reza Pahlavi's regime, he had to hide underground in the 60s and the 70s. He was jailed on multiple occasions for protesting the monarchy and the Shah. He was a power player within the revolution, however. He was a critical part in helping, which is why the regime trusted him to be the supreme leader once his turn came in 1989. He survived, and I'm not sure if you ever watched him speak or watched him walk around in public. You'd always notice he had a little sling, a little cast on about right here, and he'd always wave with his left hand because his right arm was paralyzed. He almost died in 1981 and was paralyzed, and his right arm, his right hand, couldn't move it. So that also was the regime used that paralyzation fact to say, hey, Khamenei, he almost died for you, so you should remain loyal to him. And he built a reputation as a cleric, and he was a veteran of the Iran-Iraq War, which we will discuss here later. So he had a strong resume for the Islamic Republic. He was a figure that the regime trusted him with, for sure. Okay, he's born just 2 years before this, so we're not really thinking about him right now. Let's go to the Anglo-Soviet invasion of Iran. The Second World War has begun. It's in full swing, where we know the big power players for this conflict, and Iran declared neutrality, right? Reza Shah is still the head of state at this time. However, Western powers, even though Iran was neutral, had a glaring suspicion that Reza Shah might have been in the pocket of the Austrian painter and other German Nazi regime personnel. That the West, as you'll learn in Operation Ajax, the West does not like these Middle Eastern countries having complete sovereignty over over their oil refineries, having absolute sovereignty and control over water ports. So on August 25th, 1941, Britain invaded from the south, Soviet Union invaded from the north. As we discussed in the Anglo-Saxon deal a couple of slides ago, you already had that map set up. You already had the borders and the timeline essentially ready to go. And the Iranian army stood no match. It was less than a day, I believe. The country surrendered. And we're aligned with the Soviets at this time. And Reza Shah, they were kind to him. They said, you can respectfully resign, or we're going to kill you or torture you. And he was tossed. So Reza Shah, he's gone. He's tossed from the throne, ending his reign as the monarch. Just a couple years later, you have one of the most important and maybe more recognizable photos in World War II history is at the 1943 Tehran Conference between Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill. In Iran, their sovereignty was violated. They were occupied. They had no control over. So the Shah's son was officially the monarch of the country. However, we were like, okay, you're not going to do anything, and he was essentially put in timeout in the corner. Was a worthless head of state at that moment. So I thought a cool little fact is that D-Day was planned during this conference. So just something to Iran has a lot of history in it, and even when their personnel is maybe not necessarily involved, huge historical events have been planned within the nation's borders. The last Shah, right? Reza Shah, he's tossed, he loses the throne. However, Reza Pahlavi, he has one more crack at it. After the Second World War, he's thrusted back into power in Tehran, and through heavy backing of Western powers, implements Western culture. The White Revolution of 1963 occurs under the last Shah. But now, remember, you have people like Rollo Khomeini and Ali Khamenei that are in the shadows looking at all of this through their teachings. Remember, Khamenei, born to a cleric. Pahlavi exiled future supreme leaders, Khomeini and Khamenei. Khamenei was sent to a more rural part of Iran. Khomeini, for the majority of his 14-year exile, I believe, was sent to France. That's where he spent most of his time. However, in terms of Western ideals, women were granted the right to vote. No more forced dress code, and this no more hijab dress code that was forced. However, it did spark a rivalry with Rollo Khomeini, another figure that is critically important in Iranian history. That's just a little background on the last Shah. However, we need to look at democracy was implemented for a period of time in Iran. After Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh was elected, he was tossed and overthrown by the CIA and MI6, which is British intelligence. He was removed from his head of state. not head of state, but essentially he was the head of state, right? Why did this happen? Nationalized Iran's oil, which, if you go back to the Anglo-Saxon Convention, remember the Soviets and the British, they occupied the oil. So that really upset the major Western power in the country. The British were not particularly excited, but Iranian nationalism rises. His popularity surges, and he's actually named the 1951 Time Person of the Year. Nowadays, it's always the President of the United States every year, or after every election they win, or maybe it's Taylor Swift or somebody like that. However, in 1951, Mohammad Mossadegh was he was awarded the Time Person of the Year due to his efforts for Iranian nationalism. And the Shah backed down, right? He was no match to this at all. Operation Ajax happens, to where he's removed from the head of state. And again, I've mentioned that this is probably the third or fourth time now. This is a nationalism thing. It fueled anti-Western ideology once again. Another reason to be wary of the West. Let's go a little further into the White Revolution of 1963 in Iran. Deemed to be a white revolution because when we think of maybe the American Revolution, other revolutions, that there's people that are killed or need to be violently removed or eliminated or something of that matter. However, this was a Western liberation revolution, more or less. Peasants were given land, schools in rural areas were constructed, women were able to vote, and the dress code was much better, right? It was not such oppression. The traditionalists were not, like Ruhollah Khomeini and Ali Khamenei were not thrilled to see this by any means, and it really kind of sparked the flame in Khomeini's head that said, enough, never again, or I'm sick of seeing this. Women in Iran. There are some photos. If you go Google after this presentation, go to Google Images and Google Iranian women 1950, and you'll see they're in bikinis. They're looking particularly beautiful. They're looking nice. And you could mistake that for an image of women in 2026 outside of the beach in Panama City Beach, Florida, or Los Angeles, California, in the summertime. Something like that. So it's a whole different culture that the Shah had under, again, an identity thing. And they could run for office. They could run for the parliament. They were allowed to seek government positions. Now they were able to go to school, go to college. They were working much more active in public life than current day. And after the 1979 Iranian Revolution, the hijab laws returned. Okay? So that's just something about the women, right? We see now I should say deceased Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, one of his last public appearances, believe maybe 4 months ago, it was with exclusively a bunch of Iranian women stating that women should be like a flower. Once they're seed, give them some water and they'll sprout like a flower. So even the propaganda within the regime still wanted to show women that were supported, right? And all of the women, if you watch the video, I watched the video. if you watch the video when Khamenei was speaking, giving his remarks, all of the women were in the hijab still, right? So, still a cultural thing there. Ruhollah Khomeini deserves his own slide because he's Iran's, I'd argue, George Washington, essentially. Or the current regime's George Washington, I should say. The first supreme leader, the inaugural office holder, led a huge, was a big-time power player within the revolution to toss and remove the Shah from power, and he led for just slightly under 10 years and was exiled for 14 years, a majority of the time spent in France due to his vocal opposition against the Shah and then the monarchy. However, I don't want to paint it that he's some innocent guy. He did order for mass executions of political prisoners, and lied about promising freedom to the Iranian people, right? So, again, he was, you can argue, treated unfairly, right? He was exiled for a time, but did not necessarily return the favor by any means in the future. So, a critically important figure for you to understand. If you look at, I think he's on the plane. I believe 60 News is, 60 Minutes, excuse me, not 60 News. 60 Minutes is talking to him, and some people online, I can't remember his exact quote, but he essentially had a mentality of, I'm coming back for Iran, the Islamic Republic. We're going to rise up and do our own thing. We've been under the thumb of the West for far too long. It's our turn to do our deal. And here's where you get the end of the Shah. The Reza Pahlavi, the SAVAK, the regime's secret police is not able to maintain and control the population. It's overwhelmed. And again, the Shah, something when I see online, people are like, oh, we need to free the Iranian people, we need to get the Shah back. They weren't particularly free before either. They were still, if they went against the government, they were punished, they were killed, they were jailed, imprisoned, exiled even. So, when you're hearing about free Iran, we need to free Iran, fine, yeah, I'm not advocating for the continuation of the current regime. It's just, now that you know Iran's history, is that they weren't particularly free before either. And clerical figures like Ruhollah Khomeini and Ali Khamenei, they are elevated at a rapid rate. However, the Shah, he does have I think he has cancer. He goes to Maryland for medical treatment to seek treatment for his diagnosis. His disease, it progresses quickly. He dies a year later in Egypt, I believe. He doesn't live much longer after he's removed as the Shah. And this does mark a civilizational milestone for Persia, is that the 2,500 years of kingship in Persia is now, it's concluded. At least for the time being, I should say. On the other side of the tarmac, here comes Ruhollah Khomeini. The mass protests and the clergy-led movement end the Shah. The Shah, he's done. He is, has to seek treatment for his cancer diagnosis. and he declares the Islamic Republic. He declares himself the supreme leader a short period of time later, and implements a theocracy, planet Earth's only theocracy, to the state. The hostage crisis is seen as a payback to Western pain and troubles. Let's go right to that hostage crisis, as I want to mention there. These revolutionary students are seized at the embassy in Tehran. A little over 50 diplomats and citizens are held hostage for 444 days. And remember, the exiled Shah, he's got cancer. He's got to bail town. The mullahs and regime supporters, it's seen as a retaliation for overthrowing Mohammad Mossadegh during Operation Ajax in 1953. And now this is the beginning of the end for any United States and Iranian relations on a diplomatic level, a true diplomatic level, I should say. And now it's just again, this is now the 5th or 6th time I've mentioned this. Iranian nationalism, a common belief in something. Iran-Contra. In the mid-'80s, I remember when I was a student in high school, in my freshman year history class, everyone had to pick a certain figure in history to make a poster board on, learn about. And my individual, looking back now, was Oliver North, the individual who exposed this scandal, the Iran-Contra scandal. The idea was to get the American hostages out of Lebanon that were held by the crown jewel proxy for the Iranian regime, Hezbollah. As we saw, they just recently entered the conflict with strikes against Israeli military infrastructure and personnel a few evenings ago in sidebar. Both countries denied involvement at the beginning of this, and it was an embarrassment to the Ronald Reagan administration. It damaged the credibility, like, what's going on here? So, and again, like, it was a secret that the government didn't want you to know about, and now it was just exposed because of Oliver North. And even though in public both countries talked tough against each other, they were still in discussions. So a big deal there. As I mentioned a few slides ago, Ali Khamenei was a veteran in this conflict. He served in this conflict. Saddam Hussein and Iraq invaded Iran. Hussein thought with a brand new regime, a brand new government, that Iran would be particularly weak and maybe pliable to be overthrown or to seek regime change within the Republic. It was Khomeiни's first full year as supreme leader, and it was an 8-year-long war of attrition. A lot of people died of it, between 500,000 to 1 million total casualties. There was a lot of economic devastation. However, it galvanized the regime, and we see the IRGC, a major force that we're going to be talking about a lot further here tonight, the Revolutionary Guard. They gained this prominence. It's their first big test, and they succeed, more or less. And again, now this is the 6th to 7th time I've mentioned, Iran has a national identity. They have been attacked, and they defend themselves, actually. They ultimately There's no regime change. They hold on, and it only fuels people that maybe were skeptics before to grow further in support of the Iranian government and the mullahs. Now let's go to part 2 of Where's Ali Khamenei? President of Iran. He was the 3rd president of Iran from 1981 to 1989. Survived the 1981 assassination attempt. Mentored by Ruhollah Khomeini, a big-time ally of the Islamic Republican Party. A huge role between the war's leadership and the post-revolutionary regime building. Was able to promote the Islamic ideology within critical institutions, important institutions. And after Ruhollah Khomeini, I believe Khomeini had 8 heart attacks in 8 days and died shortly after that. He was quickly appointed the 2nd supreme leader of the country. Now let's take, at least under this current regime, something. Now we've gotten through a lot of the major history for the country. That's the history, I would argue, lecture or history presentation for the show. Now we need to understand why this regime is still around. What are the main tools and the toolbox to keep the regime in power, to present dominance and authority? So it's a theocracy. You have the supreme leader, the Ayatollah, holds all of the authority. He's the Pope and the dictator, essentially. There is an elected president. However, the supreme leader selects the candidates, or approves of the candidates able to run for president of Iran. So really not a real president even. Just a puppet figure, somebody that is semi-close to the regime, that will protect the regime in public. The president, the incumbent president, Perzeskian, is often, even before Khamenei died, would host a majority of the public events for the regime. He'd be the individual that would speak up about conflicts or other troubling events much more than the supreme leader ever would. And there are there is a parliament, but it's essentially, almost think of it as your city councilman. Right, you call your city councilman, hey, the power line's down, I need you to get Vectran to pick it all up. Or there's been a parked car on the street for 7 months, I need the city to come tow the truck. Or you know what I mean? It's very simple day-to-day activities. Huge power centers within the regime, as I mentioned. The supreme leader, dictator, essentially. He controls not only the regular Iranian military, but the Revolutionary Guard as well. The judiciary, state media, all of the state media goes through him, and he can veto anything that the Congress or the Parliament sends his way anyway. So let's say all of the members go rogue, all of a sudden, he can still reject anything he wants. There's no risk there to overthrowing him. The Assembly of Experts, we see, if you've been checking up with the news, the country is in need of a new supreme leader now. It's the first vacancy since '89 after Khamenei was elected by the Assembly of Experts. This 88 member clerical body, excuse me. I believe they're elected to 4-year terms. They're in and out, frequently elected, and they are the body that will not implement, but they will kind of appoint or insert is the word I was trying to think of. They will insert the next supreme leader. And under the Constitution, they do have the power to remove the supreme leader. However, it's a dictatorship. That's never going to happen. So it's kind of a fake body, if that makes sense. And the Guardian Council is another major, I should argue, institution within the Republic. It's 6 clerics and 6 jurists. They vet candidates for president. They review laws. They advise the supreme leader on important matters. And this discernment council will handle any disputes between the Guardian Council and the Parliament. And the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the parallel military industrial empire, they've really, especially, not even under Khamenei they were important, but under Khamenei is where you've seen this huge growth of the group. They have their own agenda. They're totally separate from the Iranian military, the standard military. They hold their own... they have their own objectives, their own finance centers, their own everything, right? They're a whole different institution within the Iranian regime. Some judicial and legal frameworks, right? Again, the head of judiciary is appointed by the supreme leader. So again, it's kind of a fake institution. It is Sharia law, so the law of the land is Sharia law. It's a theocracy, as I mentioned. There is some civil law implemented within the country, but it's very, very minimal, right? It is a Islamic Republic that is controlled by jurists, and the top jurist is the Ayatollah, the supreme leader. And there are some human rights concerns like capital punishment, killing, right? We saw during some of these protests that there was at least a number of protesters killed during this more recent uprising, for sure. Okay, so now the IRGC, they need to get their own slide, right? Because actually, I was at an event maybe 8 months ago, something like that. Maybe a couple months after I finished this presentation, after my original research, I met with a gentleman, and he was from Iran. He was a part of the diaspora. His mother fled the country after the 79 revolution, and for his senior thesis in college, he took on the challenge of who would succeed Ali Khamenei as supreme leader. Ali Khamenei, when he died, he was 86 years old. We know his prostate was removed in 2014. There are reports that his prostate cancer was returning to him, that threatened his life. So maybe he wasn't going to live much longer regardless. But his thesis focused on that, well, what does Khamenei, if you've been paying attention tonight, Khamenei was mentored by Ruhollah Khomeini. And Khomeini, first supreme leader, top of the 79 revolution. So that means Khamenei had ties to the 79 revolution. He was exiled. He was a key figure in helping remove the Shah. So he had the ties to the 79 revolution. However, this individual I discussed this with realized that Khamenei's been around so long and the 79 revolution was 47, 50 years ago, that most of those people are now dead. They're too old to really reign as the supreme leader, to have the justification for really having the ideals of the 79 revolution. So his thesis, he argued, and I kind of came up with the same conclusion, is that the IRGC would essentially, they'd have a puppet supreme leader, a puppet Ayatollah, but the Revolutionary Guard would be more or less having total reign on the country. It would be a military state, essentially. And we may be seeing this if you're seeing reports of Khamenei's son, I believe his name starts with an M, I can't pronounce it, Mojab, something like that, would be maybe the third supreme leader of Iran. And that would make sense because his father helped the IRGC grow at a significant rate, and he'd essentially be the puppet Ayatollah, the puppet supreme leader with some name legitimacy, even though it cuts against the ideals of ending 2,500 years of kingship in Persia by having the bloodline Khamenei's son succeed Khamenei, that being a problem in itself, because the IRGC would have total control of the country at that point. So it really, they could sidestep that problem of not having a justified leader from the 79 revolution anymore, because the IRGC would actually be the leader. So I think that's what's going to happen, especially if Khamenei's son is the next supreme leader, if the regime can survive this campaign waged by Israel and the United States. However, what does the Revolutionary Guard actually do? They're separate from the military. They conduct internet blackouts. They will attempt to remove people that are unloyal to the regime or help sniff out traitors if they can, and will elevate the supreme leader. They're always looking for ways to, especially under Ali Khamenei, to expand his reach. They were incredibly loyal to him. They reported to the supreme leader and worked for the supreme leader, as well as advanced the supreme leader's agenda. So now with Khamenei no longer there, the fate of the group now is they kind of have their own sandbox now for the first time. They served the time needed to under Khamenei, and now they might get it. We know who was the chief of staff or the leader of the Revolutionary Guard, Qasem Soleimani. We'll talk about him in a little bit. So something that if you see online, if you've been following, they're like, oh, we killed the Ayatollah, and then somebody will quote tweet that tweet and say, we replaced an Ayatollah, or the Ayatollah with another Ayatollah, or the Ayatollah, or something like that, right? It's because it's similar to a cardinal, the rank of a cardinal in the Catholic Church, or some other hierarchy within their religion. That's what an Ayatollah is. They're in Tehran. I'm not sure if you've been paying attention. After the nuclear strikes against Fordo and Isfahan and Natanz, there was a 98-year-old Ayatollah that issued a fatwa calling for the death of Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump. And they were like, oh, why didn't Khamenei say this? Well, it's a lot of elderly men that kind of like at the Catholic Church in Rome. It's just a bunch of old dudes praying. And now where's this come from? Again, this is probably now the 7th or 8th time I've mentioned a national identity. As it comes from their religion. The Ayatollah, it's a Shiite cleric, source of emulation. And the Council of Guardians, the body I mentioned before, includes 6 of these Ayatollahs within the body. But there is always some divide, right? There's other clerical networks. There's other ayatollahs that oppose the religious teachings of other ayatollahs, right? So they're not all on the same page. It's not a monolith. Let's focus on the office of the supreme leader in particular. Now you have formerly Ali Khamenei, the second supreme leader. The office is now vacant. He was loyal to really. I've said this a gazillion times now at this point. The head of state. He was the sovereign. Rules with significant force and power. Controls the state media. Controls the candidates that run for president. Wears multiple hats. Not multiple turbans. He's the supreme leader and the dictator at once. And he was 86 years old at the time of his killing. So, but again, like makes all foreign policy decisions. State media can veto any laws from the Congress or the judiciary or the other legislative bodies, the parliament, the military, whether that's the standard Iranian military or the Revolutionary Guard, reported to Khamenei exclusively. So for one person out of a nation of 92 million has had a lot of sole capabilities there. Geopolitical leverage points, as back to the analogy about all countries at the table for a game of poker. The Strait of Hormuz, that's 20% of the global oil supply. That's a big deal right there. They can close it at any time and cause stress and discomfort to global markets. The proxy network, I believe there's a whole slide on them alone, but the proxies spread the Iranian revolutionary ideals and the regime's objectives to other countries in the Middle East and within the region. As you've seen it in the war going on, if you've been following, their two strongest cards by far is the missile defense program, the hypersonic missiles. They have been able to produce very, very cheap, and drone programs as well. Their drones seem to be maybe not at a high level, but at a noteworthy level, targeting strikes overwhelming the Iron Dome within Tel Aviv and other key financial centers within Israel, and U.S. bases and the Gulf countries as well, and other targeting other financial centers of Gulf countries, right, and other Arab nations. And the nuclear program is a bargaining chip. As I've said before, having the bomb, it's not really necessary. It's having the hedge and the edge to acquire the bomb is what really is their kind of threat, right? They always want to have the appearance of maybe being close to the bomb. Okay, so that's some of their leverage points. Yeah, the regime is able to utilize to remain in power. Maybe it's to prevent a domestic uprising or attacks such as what's happening right now. A little more on the nuclear program itself is now their public view and public statements have always been is that it's a civilian nuclear program used for agriculture or medical equipment and not meant to enrich for weapons grade uranium. However, there is global skepticism, whether it's other Arab nations or European countries, the United States, Israel, really anywhere else is kind of, are you for sure, dog? Really? Like, we don't really believe you. And now here's something that I've talked about this a little bit. You have or mentioned this before, is that, excuse me, sorry. All of this right now, what's happening is totally unnecessary. Because in 2015, 2016, Obama had this solved for the time being. The Iran nuclear deal, the Iranians were compliant with it. After several IAEA inspections, there was no wrongdoing by the Iranians, and it was for global sanction relief that some of the sanctions were uplifted. That Iran, they were not allowed to enrich uranium at above a certain percentage, and everything that was reported is that they were compliant with it. Everybody was holding up their end of the deal with the Iran nuclear deal. However, in 2018, Donald Trump exited from the deal, which caused anger, confusion, I should say, as well, because it was effective. They were not enriching uranium. And now, we saw in September of 2025, the IAEA monitoring is cut off. They were shut off. The valve was cut off. The tap was eliminated. And they just totally went silent when it came to the nuclear program. And the program, it gives the country leverage, as I said, in terms of policy, diplomacy, whatever. It gives them a bargaining chip that a lot of other countries don't have. Now comes in the proxy network. One of the, I'd argue probably right now, the second biggest, if not the biggest, factor of regime survival. You have proxies that allow the regime to spread its influence across the Middle East, particularly the crown jewel proxy with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. You should check out the Lebanon episode I created a few months ago about how Iran was giving Hezbollah around $1 billion to help rebuild, because I think they knew what was coming. And just a couple months from then, you also have the Houthis that target on the Red Sea. They target cargo shipping and the waterways, the other boats on the Red Sea that carry expensive and important goods and other huge resources, right? Hamas within Palestine, they keep a check right on the borders of Israel, along with Hezbollah to the north. The PMF, the Popular Mobilization Force in Iraq, that helps. And as well, before Assad's regime fell in December of 2024, the Revolutionary Guard had a major presence in Syria for that the Syrian civil war. And they're still Shiite militias within Syria. So what I'm trying to say is that you have the identity that has now expanded into several countries across the Middle East and the region. And it forces kind of all of the other countries to at least kind of keep the ear wide open, eyes open for attacks or other conflict mechanisms that these proxy groups may be able to inflict on them. We know that Tehran funds these proxy groups, whether it's cash or ammunition, guns, weapons, intelligence, Revolutionary Guard training and support. And now they are deemed the world's largest state sponsor of terror due to having these groups, though. So that's the downside of it for the Iranian perspective. Let's take a look at where the global relationships where they currently sit worldwide. As you've seen, nobody's really helping them except their proxies. They're kind of on their own. China is really nowhere to be found, and same with Russia. Even their biggest allies are nowhere to be seen. So it's Iran versus yeah, it's kind of Iran versus the United States, and two major powers right now, and that's causing some stress in Tehran. However, you have the United States, you have sanctions, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action under President Obama. 2020, you have this assassination of Qasem Soleimani, the founder and the architect of the Axis of Resistance, otherwise known as the proxy network. Russia, they get some help from Syria coordination when Assad, because Russia lost a lot of influence when Assad went down as well. There. So Russia, you have arms sales, energy deals, intelligence coordination. Same with China. So we know China's Belt and Road investments and initiative runs through the Islamic Republic to kind of help get to Europe. We know Europe, right? Kind of same as the United States. The nuclear program is a concern for the European nations. The snapback sanctions were applied in September of 2025. In North Korea, they're really aligned just because both are anti-West in general, so but nothing major there. So that's just a little bit of the global stage that the country finds themselves at the moment. Other Middle Eastern and neighbor relations, right? The Sunni capital of Muslims, right? In Saudi Arabia, there's always a kind of rivalry. Maybe the Kentucky Wildcats versus the Louisville Cardinals kind of beef, right? Close in proximity. They're both, in this case, both Muslim, both from Kentucky, but there's always that rivalry that will always kind of be there. And again, college sports is not, we're not trying to kill each other. We're not trying to inflict major harm. Like, that's just a good little analogy maybe to help you at home understand this. Excuse me. But really, they're kind of, as you've seen with all of these attacks against the Gulf countries, Iran, they're kind of on their own again, once again. Like, they're totally globally isolated from, for all of this. So, just a little something for you to understand there as well. Especially, so a question that I get all the time is that, well, the Iraq invasion in 2003, right, you have Saddam Hussein go down. Why did Iran not help Iraq? Well, even though Iraq is a little more Shiite population, is that Hussein was a Sunni Muslim himself. So a rising tide lifts all boats. So with Iraq gone, Iran was able to get the popular mobilization force integrated a lot more within the country, and as well, it destabilized the nation. Some economic sanctions and social change there has been even before these protests in late 2025, early 2026. The oil is still the big, and natural gasoline is still the biggest, most important factor for their economy, for sure, right? Especially with the snapback sanctions, They cannot get integrated in the regional economy, and even things with China and Russia are limited. Even trade, I should say, with Russia and China. They're going through the same thing that we are. Their currency, high inflation. I should say we have high inflation, but their currency also collapsed couple days after New Year's Day, or few days before New Year's Day. It just totally fell. Like their central bank went under. So that's another stressor for the regime that they have to figure out. It's the youth population. They went to school. Even some of the women have been allowed. The regime has lifted some restrictions on education for women within the country, but there's still some difficulties, right? And some big protest waves in the last 10 to 15 years in particular against Khamenei's regime. Wanting to go into these protests for another moment, the Green Movement in 2009, anytime you see these big protests happen, on one of the man on the street interviews with the younger lady I should say I was talking to, is that she was able to reach out to some of her relatives and family members within the country before the internet was totally just shut down, after the attacks last Saturday morning / Friday night. And this Masha Amini woman in particular, this protest in 2022 began because she defied the hijab laws and was beat to death by Revolutionary Guard security forces, and it sparked a mass protest in that sector. And I believe even a couple of months ago, I saw something that Pezeshkian's the incumbent president of Iran, we'll check this after, but the incumbent president of Iran, Pezeshkian's, one of his daughters broke the hijab rule or something, and the regime lifted the hijab clause for a period of time, or maybe it's still lifted, I'm not sure, but I did see something about that. There is a lot of surveillance, right? Big brother type of feel. And we see the protest happening late December, early January of 2025, or 2026, late 2025 and early 2026 occur across the country. One of the individuals I spoke with on Saturday was an Iranian diaspora. He said he had lived in Isfahan and had been in the United States for 45 years or something like that. Now, 5 to 7 million Iranians fled the country around the 79 revolution after that occurred. And there's still some, one of the figures, if you saw, again, on one of the man on the street interviews, a woman was holding a picture of her cousin that had been killed by security personnel during the protest back in January, had a photo of the Shah, wanted Reza Pahlavi to regain the title of, or the crown for the monarchy, right? So let's immediate future for Iran, right? Who is going to follow Ali Khamenei now that following his death now in particular? I'd say an advantage that the regime had is that he was 86. That's just an old man in general, regardless. So they had to be expecting something would be coming, but maybe not in the manner or the fashion that it occurred in. How can the economy improve? What's the future of the nuclear program if the regime survives? How do they Do they continue it? How do they continue it? And what's maybe you're going to need some kind of reforms as well. So a lot of questions for the future of the Islamic Republic. And as we wrap up here, some stuff that's important to remember about the country, right? The identity. Again, this is now the 8th or 9th time I've talked about that identity. That Persian identity, the revolutionary, the 12-layer Shiite Islam, all the way back, right? Like 15, or not even 15, like 25 or 30 slides ago now. Clerical institutions ensure the regime survives at all times. And the proxy network, that's a big help to counter Israeli and Western influence across the region and other Sunni militias. But the domestic legitimacy is in question with these, all these snapback sanctions from Europe in September 2025. So that's the end of the slide deck. Psych, actually, we're not done at all. Buckle up, we have another like 20 slides to go. So get comfy, all right? I'm not done talking yet. We're going to hop right in. Where is Ali Khamenei part 3 of this low slide deck series? June 2025, where the Israeli and the United States launched these historic strikes. It's the first time that we had attacked Iran in several decades. The strikes resulted in the deaths of many Revolutionary Guard generals being decapitated, nuclear scientists as well, Iranian nuclear scientists, and nuclear launch point sites in Fordo and other key nuclear infrastructure capabilities. However, at the time, Khamenei was still alive, so I made it with him in present tense. Khamenei survived the June strikes. For his enemies, silence is a mystery. For his allies, it's a calculation that he, as I've mentioned, we've talked about Khamenei in particular as an individual a lot tonight. Veteran, president of Iran, second supreme leader, mentored by ruler Khamenei, father is a cleric. He gets the shindig. Does that make sense? That's part of his identity as a human being and somebody that was exiled, right? He had fought for the 79 revolution, and now he has a chance. It's on the brink. Okay, so we'll just keep going after that. So the succession question we talked about a couple slides ago. Khamenei, old man, right? Who was going to replace him? Qasem Soleimani would have been, in terms of a strategic calculation, would have been the perfect selection. The architect of the axis of resistance. He built the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Popular Mobilization Force in Iraq, had the Revolutionary Guard in Syria when Assad was still around. He built all of it. And you have this on January 3rd, 2020. If you go to the Supreme Leader's pinned tweet on Twitter, that's the tweet. The day that Soleimani was killed, that's the tweet. Like the big architect of the influence through the proxy network. Beloved, second in popularity only to Khamenei within, at least that's what the regime would tell you. So Soleimani would have been that next figure to be the supreme leader. And once he was killed, millions mourned his loss. Big time figure in Iranian society. A couple years ago, the president, somebody else who could have been maybe the next supreme leader after Soleimani was gone, Khamenei, he's still 83, 84 years old at this point now. So the president, Raisi, I believe, dies in a helicopter crash in Iran's northwest mountains. Seen just kind of freak accident, right? Yeah, it stinks, I guess, for him. But he could have been, he could have been the next supreme leader at that rate. Wasn't, maybe not a whole lot of conspiracy about his death. Maybe some people thought it was foul play, or Khamenei realizing that he's on a personal level grown more unpopular, so needed to remove somebody that could have threatened him, and that wasn't as important as Soleimani. This president did not build the proxy network or do anything significant in those regards. Iran, second half of 2025. It's the Assembly of Experts. As I said, they're never going to be involved on a major level. The President Soleimani, they're both dead now. The Revolutionary Guard, to their advantage, they've grown more prominent and important within the regime. However, they lack the clerical legitimacy to fit the theocracy. Are you starting to see how difficult it is for the particular person to kind of make sense in this country, right? Because the identity, excuse me, the identity matters so much. And a huge swath of the population, a little over 60%, is under 30 years old, meaning they have no ties at all to the 79 revolution. Why does Iran not trust the United States at all? Is because, I've mentioned it several times, Soleimani's death, Operation Ajax, overthrowing Mohammad Mossadegh. The United States, we provided Iraq chemical weapons in the Iran-Iraq war. The weapons of mass destruction in 2003 was a lie. Donald Trump said that, and that's why it's such a shame that we're in the current situation we are right now with him declaring war, or maybe not officially declaring war, but yeah, we're in a regime change war against Iran right now. United States and NATO, Gaddafi, he's removed in Libya, which causes a lot of chaos. The JCPOA, even when the Iranians were compliant, they left the Iran nuclear deal. The United States did, and you have other cyber attacks like what G Money 2024, G Money Forever 2024 mentioned the other night, the Sputnik attack against the centrifuges for Iran's nuclear program, causing them to spin out of control and blow up and become destroyed. And why does the deep state hate Iran? Is that there's no Rothschild central controlled bank. They have their own currency. They have their own deal. And they are able to avoid sanctions outside from Western sanctions through their oil, through China and Russia in particular. They do not, with the media blackout, there is no... you're not going to find OnlyFans in Iran or other degeneracy such as that within the Republic. There's no big tech, no Hollywood, corporate media, right? There's state media. And it can't be controlled, right? They have been, their identity essentially demands that they resist Western influence and culture and other demands. So the deep state wants to erase Iran. They want to remove it, decapitate its government, and install that Western puppet from the Shah again. Why does Israel in particular want the regime gone? So here's a key distinction, right? At least before Donald Trump, a couple of days ago, the United States public position on Iran was that the nuclear program was a no-no. I've made this analogy before on the show that we do not want, the college basketball analogy, where we are in the SEC and we don't want the mid-major joining the SEC. So no nuclear Yeah, no nuclear bomb, no nuclear proliferation. It could cause an arms race from Saudi Arabia or Turkey or other Middle Eastern powers if Iran actually did get the bomb. So, okay, fine. No nuclear bomb. But now it's the Israelis have several more demands. Hezbollah, they want the proxy network dismantled. No proxies at all. So Hezbollah needs to go. Hamas needs to go. The Houthis need to go. The Popular Mobilization Force in Iraq, they need to go. And anything in Syria has to go as well. And if they can remove this regime, then the proxy networks, it's a chicken with its head cut off, essentially running around. As we've seen, the Israelis are always we're calling for preemptive strikes, killing the supreme leader, assassinating nuclear scientists, and openly calling for regime change, saying that we will resist anything that isn't with this current regime. And Iran is also, you could argue, like a counterbalance to Israel within the region as well. Israel cannot have regional hegemony with Iran and the current regime still in power. Let's go into what happened last summer, which is really what sparked this interest for me. Is Operation Rising Lion. As I've said before, the old flag under the Shah had a little golden lion in the middle of the flag. So the idea was to raise for regime change, right? It's always been about regime change for them. So bombing Revolutionary Guard personnel, other major players in that regard. Hit key nuclear sites. A lot of commanders were eliminated, Revolutionary Guard fellas. And then we get involved for the first time. Donald Trump brings us into the conflict. We drop the bunker buster bombs on the nuclear facilities. And again, here's the problem. Is that clearly the fact that, or the claim from J.D. Vance and Donald Trump that the nuclear facilities were obliterated last summer is a lie. There's no way around it. It had to be a lie because the pretext for jumping into this war is that Iran can never have a nuclear bomb. We saw Steve Witkoff the other day claim that the Iranians were maybe a week away from building the bomb, right? It's the same song and dance every time. It doesn't really matter what the strikes did or what they would have done. We were going to war anyway. Last summer was just to get you maybe in the mood or prepare you for what was going to happen a couple days ago. And yeah, like they're just going to try and rebuild. But if they were obliterated, then how could they rebuild the nuclear facilities? So that's just kind of my view there. And now, okay, promise this is the last slide for now. Iraq fell, Libya, Gaddafi, a pipe was shoved so far up his buttocks, it killed him. Assad, he's in Russia now, playing Xbox in Moscow. And Hussein was hung in front of his own people. Lebanon is split into several mini countries, right? Hezbollah's been weakened severely. Hamas within Palestine is worthless now. The Houthis on the Red Sea are not as strong as they were 10 years ago. But however, the regime, at least as of this moment, remains. It's severely battered, bruised, attacked, bleeding, but survived. The regime is regime survival. And what happens next? And here I'm going to leave the slide deck and I'll get into the monologue section of the night. is that why are we here right now? Right? You hear, so now, let me step back 1 second. Operation Epic Fury, right, begins a couple of days ago. But let's go into the diplomacy right before this attack occurred. Actually, let's go a decade ago. Mentioned this during the slide deck. The president said it was the Iraq War was a mistake, a stupid war, should never have happened. It was based off of a lie, and promised never to do regime change wars, never to get involved in the Middle East, anything like that. And well, look at where we are now. We're 1 year into this presidency. The tariffs failed, refunded. Mass deportations not happening. They gave up in Minneapolis. The Epstein files are being covered up. They lied about that. They tried to cover them up, and if it wasn't for Thomas Massie, they'd still be covered up. They failed at covering them up after a promise to release them. And we hear, mass deportations, they're unpopular. They're going to hurt my poll numbers. Well, what the hell can be more unpopular than a regime change war in Iran and covering up the Epstein files? Seriously. What does it say about our political system? That no matter, even if the candidate that promises to never do something like this, makes it his core campaign promise and pillar, does it anyway. And you see all of the Republicans saying, oh, it's 5D chess. Oh, Aulden, don't be a panickin. You're a left-wing nut job, dude. Trust the plan. Well, I'm sorry, I'm done with this. It's absolutely unacceptable what has been happening with this. Is that it's, once again, these domestic priorities worsen every day. The cities are too expensive. There's crime everywhere. Even with the National Guard, people are still getting killed all over D.C. Robberies, the homeless sleeping everywhere. There's trash and garbage all over the roads, all in the streets, all in the ditches. Everything continues to get worse. And instead of fixing that to try and improve your poll numbers, or it's like he doesn't even care. Like, at this point, what does voting matter if if we are going to war with Iran, no matter what? No matter if it's the no new wars president who just built the board of peace. Now we're going to war with the Islamic Republic. We've already lost 6, at least as of now, 6 service members. And the president said, yeah, there's probably going to be more. And, it's just so frustrating to see this, honestly. I just don't really get it. And we, the public, we're just told to shut up. And that if you are against it, you're a Ayatollah sympathizer, or you're a Hamas sympathizer, or you hate Israel, or you hate Jews, or you want another Holocaust to happen, or anything like that. And it's just really, really disappointing to see. I can't express my frustration, and it's almost like a last couple days. It's been like I'm not sure. It's like kind of in politics, like Santa Claus not being real. And once you're a little kid and realize Santa is real for all the young kids out there, but you're in politics and Santa, you realize Santa's not real, or something that you once believed in isn't real anymore, then why are we doing any of this? It feels like no matter what we do, no matter who gets elected, we're doing these regime change wars in the Middle East, And why is that, right? So you hear the statements from the president and the secretary of state and the vice president the last couple of days. Rubio says, well, Israel, they might have been attacked, so we had to join them in the preemptive attack against Iran. And you see Caroline Leavitt, she had her tweet out earlier, yesterday, I believe, saying that Marco Rubio did not say that, essentially. And then they've been running too much press on trying to say, oh, we're not doing this because of Israel. The defenders, like you see Senator Mark Wayne Mullen of the Senate, in the Senate from Oklahoma, he's trying to do his best to defend the admin. He's kind of running point on media relations, at least for the Senate, with the Trump admin. And then, yeah, like the War Powers resolution failed in the Senate today. I believe Rand Paul was the only Republican that voted with the Democrats on it. So you have that. But back to Israel for a second, is they're supposed to be, from what the president has said and how much they're trying to run cover on it, it's basically sounding like, and let's go into this for a second. I did a very deep timeline, and basically everything after I said psych, or a little bit before that, from the second we left the JCPOA in 18, is really when this war began, honestly. Right? This didn't begin a couple days ago. It began in 2018 once we left the JCPOA, because that now put sanctions on Iran, that put additional pressure on them. In 2019, the year after that, the Revolutionary Guard is now classified as a terrorist organization under the Trump administration. That allows for the group for additional attacks and sabotage and economic sanctions, right? 2020, Qasem Soleimani, he's killed, he's assassinated. And then June 2025, it's bombing the nuclear facilities, and now it's bombing the supreme leader, and now it's doing this, now it's doing that. Now, again, you see how this builds up every time? So it's almost like a, maybe somebody asked you for a favor. The first time, hey, can you lend me $5? I need to go grab something to eat. And then, like, okay, that's fine, right? And then, you have that happen, right? And then next time, well, can you do this? Well, can you do that? Well, what about this? Can you blow up Qasem Soleimani? Can you bomb the nuclear program? We've been step by step, we have been dragged into this. And Iran does not present a threat to the United States, because if they did, we obliterated the nuclear program, I thought. And if they don't have the nuclear program, then what's the problem by any means at all? Seriously. They don't have ICBMs that can target the United States. Everybody knows that. And if the nuclear program's not there, then they're not a threat to the United... They're not an imminent threat. You probably saw a tweet from Tom Cotton the other day that the one sentence in the tweet was that the Iranian regime has been it's an imminent threat to the United States. And then the very next line said, for 47 years, this regime has produced terror across the world or whatever. Well, you can't have it both ways. You can't have it that they've been an imminent threat for 47 years or that they're an imminent threat right now, because you should have done something 3 to 4 decades ago before the Revolutionary Guard really grasped influence in Syria and all of these other countries, before the proxy network could be formed, before the nuclear hedge could even be constructed at all, before Soleimani could have built the Axis of Resistance. Are you kind of starting to see where I'm going with this? So it just doesn't, it's very frustrating. So, and here we are. Like, that's just what it is. There seems to be no plan. Is that, okay, the Supreme Leader, he's dead, right? But after that, at least as we know, there doesn't seem to be anything too comprehensive right now. So, let's just hope this doesn't go on for 20 years, but there's nothing that we can really, it's balls out of our court right now. So, but you've kind of seen that Israel, they're supposed to be the client state. We're supposed to be the ones that say, oh, you need to do this for us because we're the reason you exist, actually. We fund you while your citizens get free health care and free education, while our citizens are in tens of thousands of dollars of debt for getting their hip replaced. If you fall over tomorrow, walking to your car for your work and a job that your wage hasn't raised at a reasonable rate in the past several years, and that inflation has ate up any rate increase that it could have anyway. If you fall, walk into your car tomorrow, slip on the ice, break your hip, you go into bankruptcy, you're just in debt. Too bad. But this country, we seem to fund them like the Grinch with eggnog on the Grinch movie. It's just there's a little tube sucked up to their mouth, and we consistently send them more money, weapons, resources, whatever it is, and we get nothing out of it. And they're supposed to be the client state. So, who's really running the show? If Trump says, yeah, we had to attack with Israel because they were going to attack regardless, are you kidding? We should be the ones saying, no, actually, no, you don't get to attack Iran because we own you. So, that's my view there. So, yeah, let's just say we're not very happy right now with this conflict at all. And back, now let's go, as I mentioned, the Iranians, they have their identity, right? They have this unique, distinct identity. Let's go back just a couple of years into 2026. You have Nicolas Maduro, right? And we've talked about Venezuela on the show before. We've talked about the cartels on the show before. And Mexico, that more or less run the country of Mexico. Neither of those, whether it's Maduro or his regime or the cartels, really have an identity. And what do I mean by that? It's that they don't have, we really only know them out to be as drug lords or trying to kill people or retain power, right? Send drugs, stuff like that. They don't really have an identity at all. It's just they're socialist, leftist, that's kind of it. And when it comes to the Iranians, as I mentioned, it's being the minority sect in Islam, the Shiites, only being 10 to 15% of the global Muslim population, having Mohammad Mossadegh overthrown, having Qasem Soleimani assassinated, overthrowing the Shah in 79, clerical opposition to it, right? They actually believe in something. They have an identity to where if their supreme leader gets killed, they're going to be hardened to fight more, or it's for Islam, or it's for the theocracy, or it's for this or that, or one thing or another. They actually have some kind of fundamental identity. That's why I've talked about culture so much on this episode, is that you're not just going to be able, yeah, you killed the supreme leader, great. But it's not like Maduro where the regime's just going to roll over because they have this distinct and want to have their own deal when it comes to that. Okay, so that's why excuse me. That's why I've talked about the identity so much tonight, and that's what I really wanted to say about this all. So just kind of take that when we're talking about becoming awoken on the show. Is that ask these questions for 2 hours now? I've laid out the history of Iran from Cyrus the Great to post Ali Khamenei era. So take that for what you will. Okay, guys, I'm going to get into some comments in that there. So at Ronwood Nance, a heart American flag emoji. And Fred TM-E9F, hello, Mr. Nance. Sunglass guy emoji. Hello, guys. Thank you for joining the stream tonight. Glad to have you here. At Pacman579 says, keep an eye on China with the China flag emoji. And right, I think Pacman makes a very fair point, is if we're maybe being dragged into this conflict in the Middle East now, what about Taiwan? Is Taiwan a little more naked? No. And we got a couple comments from at Nicholas Alexander 940. Did you see the guy who got his arm broken today in the Senate? Oh, yeah. You should show the video and tell us what you think. Yeah, we're going to take a look at that. So, earlier today, I believe it was Senate Armed Services Committee. Here, I'm going to get this. I'm going to start getting the video pulled up. But during one of these hearings in the Senate, there are always kind of like your local city council meeting. The general public is, you're allowed, if you're ever in D.C. and want to tune in on what your members of Congress are saying, go into a Senate hearing and just listen to what they have to say. It's free, right? It's getting into the Capitol is free. You just got to find the Senate hearing room of the committee you'd like to spectate on and check things out. Well, there was a gentleman today, a Marine, that voiced his opposition to the war in Iran, saying no more dead Americans for Israel, and he was violently removed from this hearing, and it resulted in a major, I'd say, error by Montana Senator Tim Sheehy. So Capitol Police, there's always some in the Senate hearing rooms, right? Just for security, in case if someone goes ballistic, right? To remove demonstrators. And this guy stood up, right, start saying, no more dead Americans for Israel, right? And they remove him, tackle him to the ground, remove him. And at some point, they're trying to remove him, and his hand, like this door right here, his hand, the door closes, and it gets stuck inside. And they're trying to pull him out from, like, here and, like, the backside, and his arm just snaps in half. Nothing graphic, but we're going to pull up the video here in a second, and we're going to watch it together. I'm trying to get the full video. You see, I received a copy of the. Here, we're going to go full screen now. Let's go full screen real quick. Or share screen, excuse me. Okay. Like, this is a pretty. Yeah, here's the full video.
America does not want to fight this war for Israel. Let's go. Come on, let's go. America does not want to send its sons and daughters to war for Israel. Your inability to name that shows your acceptance as leaders. This is wrong. And nobody wants to fight for Israel.
A reminder to all our
Commandant, please stand up as a Marine. Stand up for America. No one wants to fight for Israel.
There's Senator Tim Sheehy there, right? And he gets up from the.
Thank you for your service.
The senator broke his hand! The senator broke his hand!
He gets up to intervene in this conflict.
Control your Senate committee!
Look at you guys, you're robots!
Very, I'd say, boneheaded.
You won't even look back! Look at you guys, you're like
Dude's
robots!
arm just snaps.
Oh my god, what is
Senator
happening?
Tim Sheehy of Montana. He was just
And you're not
elected
even
in
looking back!
2024.
Any of you
He
four-star
ousted
generals! Oh my
longtime
god,
Democrat
what is
Senator
happening
Ron
right
Tester
now? I
of
front
the
robots!
Sky State.
Shame! Shame! Oh my god, you guys! What did I just see? I'm getting out of here.
That's fine. Everybody sit down, please.
Oh my god, what is happening?
Okay, good. No, it's not.
Oh my god.
Interaction. That just kind of goes. I've seen protesters
Oh my god, you guys.
from the Senate, and even though this guy seemed to be
open it up a
resisting
little bit just to
right, it's not.
Change the gap.
Maybe he wasn't.
Hey guys, clear the hallways.
Out.
Clear the hallways. Clear the hallways. Please.
They were
Clear the hallways, please.
trying to get him out.
Can you help him, please?
Yes, yes. Please go in that. Please through the hallways.
I mentioned
Oh my
this on the show.
god, what happened? His hand got totally smashed. Oh my gosh.
And
Oh my gosh.
the
Why are you getting arrested?
Outside, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, Palestine will be.
we got okay, so kind of got the point here. And we will go to other we'll find the photo of him smoking a cigarette. Is the senator liable? Ooh, good question. At Nicholas Alexander 940. He's probably is either still meeting with counsel or has met with legal counsel very quickly after this. I think he definitely. That's what the Capitol Police are for. He had no. It was unnecessary for him to get up from his seat during being on the committee to try and assist. It just kind of goes to show where how money and politics can influence people, right? Just not a good choice at all from the senator. I want to find the photo of him with the Khamenei photo. Let's go to... Yeah, let's click his profile because he does have this photo of him, and this was done by members on both sides of the aisle as well. I will mention that in Congress. somewhere. Here it is. Yeah, so like it's a why do so many members of Congress have an obsession about overthrowing the Iranian regime? As we've covered on the show, yes, Hezbollah, the attack, barracks attack against Americans, unacceptable, bad, should be punished, right? Should be some retaliation. Same with other terrorist organizations in the Middle East. We're definitely not pro Hamas, not pro Iran at all. However, if the nuclear program is gone, then there's really no major threat to the United States. And so it's just kind of think about why so many members of Congress are willing to enthusiastically support regime change for Iran while making it look like they don't even work for the home state that they were elected to represent in their home district, right? Lindsey Graham, it's hard to even, it's laughable if you even argue that guy works for South Carolina at all. With his statements recently, like you'd almost think South Carolina didn't even exist, that he doesn't even know what that state is. Same with some of these other members of Congress. So we're just going to have to see what happens in this conflict, right? We're not at the head of the Pentagon or the Iranian regime, so we really don't have any cards to play. But if we're starting to see this conflict turn into weeks and then months, this will be deadly for the Republicans' electoral chances come November. They will lose the House for sure, if not the Senate at that rate. And back to the Iranian identity, it's regime survival. Nothing else really matters. To persist and consistently deny Western influence is their objective. That's the name of the game for them. So they have their systems in place, as I've laid out. Here, I'll go back to full screen. As I've laid out through the theocracy, the role of the supreme leader, the Revolutionary Guard, the missile defense program, the nuclear program, the drone program, the proxy network. Having all of this is essentially insurance to prevent regime change. So we'll take that for what it is. And then we'll just kind of, we'll just have to see what plays out here in the near future. But definitely, so if anyone has any questions, would love to take them. If not, that's kind of my little spiel for everything that's been happening past couple of weeks. I hope you've learned a lot about Iranian history and society, as well as the conflict, right? So thank you very much for tuning in tonight. Tomorrow is Thursday, probably do a vertical stream in the morning, chit-chat with y'all, get to know some of you guys a little better. But we'll just kind of see what topics for next. I believe next Tuesday is another primary election night. I believe Mississippi and a few other states have their primaries. A quick little recap of the Texas primaries tonight is you have the President Trump is expected to endorse John Cornyn, or at least there's talks of him endorsing him. That came out today because Cornyn and Paxton are heading to the runoff. Wesley Hunt was eliminated, and James Tallarico was the Democratic nominee for Texas. and the Lone Star State, North Carolina, Roy Cooper, Michael Watley. They are coronated as the Senate race coming up. And Arkansas was pretty not super exciting. So, and Buckout became the nominee in NC01. So definitely thrilled to report on that. But if no one has any questions, so I think I'm going to sign off here. A little tonight's episode was definitely very important for you to listen to and hear about. So, glad to be with you tonight. Thank you for tuning in. We will definitely, we'll be back with you in the morning. Just a reminder, if it's your first time on the channel, please leave the video a like, subscribe to the channel, share this video with your friends, people that may be interested in the conflict in the Middle East, and we will hear from you in the next several days, okay? So, at this rate, you have been awoken with Aulden. All right, much love, everybody. Good night. We will see you soon.